Hello, friends. Listen, the category for today is comfort, so please ignore my attire. We are here to talk about the Real Housewives of Salt Lake City. This is season. What season is this? This is season 4, episode 2. This episode was really, really, really freaking good. Like, literally all the way up until the end. Like, I don't know who is doing what over there at Salt Lake City, but each episode, each season is just better and better. So, I'm having a great time. Let's get into it. We start off the episode with Lisa and Meredith's walk in the park or wherever the heck they're at. We know that, like, last episode, Meredith, like, approached Lisa and told her that she wanted to have a sit down outside of the group so that they can move forward. Um, I enjoyed their friendship like way back when it first started or whatever, and they did the whole thing where it's like sometimes people can't tell us apart, like they were so close or whatever. And then I also enjoyed the hot mic moment thing, not for the mess of it all, but just like, I'm a dynamics girl, so I like to see the relationship move around or do whatever it's doing. Now that it's been like 2 seasons that they were beefing, it is interesting kind of out the blue that Meredith like wants to rekindle things with Lisa. I do think it's because kind of like I said last episode, Meredith doesn't necessarily have like an ally on the show, I guess. So maybe it's that, or maybe she really does want the friendship back. But either way, I'm interested to see where this goes. Lisa tells Meredith about her son Jack's mission, which told me some things because I was wondering if this mission thing, obviously Lisa was very upset about it when she told us about it, the viewers. So I was wondering if this whole mission thing was gonna be like very kind of hush hush or just like little quiet tea. But she pretty immediately tells Meredith, who she's not super close with. So I'm like, okay, it seems like she's open about it and she wants to talk about it. So that's good. Meredith, from what I recall, doesn't really give too much on the whole mission thing, but I mean, they're just kind of catching up about like lost time or what's going on, like especially with their kids. And basically they both say the same thing. Like neither one of them really trust each other and know what to expect, but they're both willing to move forward. So I think that that's good. They do acknowledge that things are not going to be the same, and I appreciated that because that is real. Like I don't think that their friendship is going to be the same, but that doesn't have to be a negative thing, right? Like I feel like sometimes you have these friendships where you like click and like you kind of just are like we're friends, and you don't really consider like the deep things, right? And I think that their friendship prior to was kind of just like fun, like, oh, she's a fun girl. I don't know if it was a super deep friendship, but now I think that they've seen where things can go and they can still develop a friendship, but while having like boundaries with each other and knowing what type of friendship they can have. So that's kind of what I picture for them. I think I picture them, I don't know, like still being some type of close and still being able to like coexist and having a good time. But I think they know each other's red flags. My favorite part though was like, which does I think show like real friendship and acknowledgement and growth, which I love from both of them because they both had very weak moments in the breakdown of their friendship where it's just like, oh my god, you guys are really just wrong road, wrong road. But I loved that Lisa was able to apologize for the hot mic moment, even though that happened a long time ago, right? It's like you're having this conversation with an old friend. You're not necessarily rehashing things at all, but it's just like you're having a conversation about moving forward. But that's what I love. They were able to go back without even rehashing what happened. They're just like, also let me apologize for what even pretty much got us here. Obviously, a lot of different things got them there, but these are the big things. So Lisa apologizes for the hot mic moment, and Meredith apologizes for the rumors that were coming out about Lisa last season. So I appreciated that. I thought that that was great. We move on to another broken down friendship, which I loved. Like the episode's already moving great, and we're watching Heather and Whitney. Almost similar thoughts to Lisa and Meredith. Like I never really bought into the whole Heather and Whitney thing. I didn't love that combo. I get it, and I'm glad that they're like friends and cousins like that. It just wasn't my fave. So, the breakdown, I would have to say, this one was a little bit more surprising to me though than the Lisa and the Meredith because Whitney and Heather seem like what they have in common is mess, and they like to like do mess and chaos on the show. nice girls, but it seems like they like the mess of it all. Like that's just their vibe. And but now it kind of feels like they're going in different directions as their individual dynamics go, especially with the ladies in the group, which is nice to see too, because it shows that there are some. I struggle to use the word authentic, but from where I stand right now, there are some authentic dynamics developing in the group, and so I think that Whitney is developing relationships with ladies in the group differently than Heather is, and I feel like what I was seeing last season was that you would expect them to come back together and be in the mess, but Whitney wasn't really trying to be in that mess. Whitney also is like always in mess, but I felt like she was in a different type of mess, whereas Heather was open to a different type of mess. I think Heather's mess is like less troll Lisa and less like let's make Lisa the issue. Whereas I feel like Whitney kind of got over that, obviously by becoming cool with Lisa in some capacity. I don't know where that's gonna go, but I think that that's how their relationship broke down. Like I think that they were friends over the commonality of wanting to create mess, and most conveniently with Lisa. And then when that broke down, they didn't really have anything anymore. So that was surprising to see that breakdown, obviously. But I definitely don't think their friendship is going to be the same either because I think that they have different interests. You know what I'm saying? Like, I still think that they're wanting to do mess, but just different types of mess. Like, I think that Whitney's mess is a very elevated, and we'll get to it, a very elevated. They both have elevated levels of like housewife-esque mess. Like, I think that they're doing really well for themselves on TV, but they're still different approaches. And I think that what makes it the biggest difference is that Whitney has better relationships with the majority of the women in the group than Heather does. I think Heather's kind of on the side of things of the women that are not really clicking with the majority, like the Merediths and the Marys and the Heathers. They kind of stand out. Whereas I think like Lisa and Whitney and now the new girl Monica, at least for now, and Angie K, they all kind of like hang for right now. So that's the difference, I think. But also similar to Meredith, I think that Heather's here trying to get back that old thing because Jen's gone. Right, and I like that Whitney was able to clock that, and she's like, I don't know what's gonna happen, but Jen's gone, so you never know because, well, like we talked about, Heather did have some weird blind loyalty to Jen for whatever reason. So we really are gonna have to see where both Meredith and Heather are and how they act now that Jen's gone. They are a lot more likable. I will say that in these last two episodes already, just because they're not like following up behind Jen and being weird, and they also don't have any other allies to be weird with because it always felt like Meredith kind of followed up behind whatever Lisa did, and Heather kind of followed up behind whatever Whitney did. So now they're really seeming to have to stand on their own, and they're actually kind of likable. That doesn't mean I agree with everything they do because I typically don't, but they're a lot more likable when they stand alone. This is something I thought was like super interesting. So basically, Whitney is asking Heather about the event that Heather just had, and she's like, "When did you become friends with Mary?" And Heather makes it very clear, like, I didn't invite anybody but Whitney and Meredith, and I didn't invite anybody but Lisa, Whitney, and Meredith, and all three of them brought friends. So Meredith brought Mary Cosby, Lisa brought Angie K, and then Whitney. Well, maybe Whitney came by herself. I don't know who Whitney came with. I can't remember. But at the end of the day, the tea here is that two people came that she didn't know was coming, and that was Mary and that was Angie. And her biggest issue is that Angie came. I hadn't thought too much into it until she said it. And even when she was saying it, I'm like, what's the tea with Angie? But she's upset with Angie about Angie's jokes that she made last season. For me, that wasn't a big deal. I'm not Heather, obviously, but for me, that wasn't a big deal because that shade happened in like the last two episodes of last season, really. I know that they butt heads a little bit in that last trip that they had because Angie spilled the tea that they were shading Lisa on the bus, but she should have spilled that tea because that was weird. But Heather's really upset about the Barbie scissor kicks joke that Angie made. And like I said, that joke came at the butt end of last season. Like Angie, I liked Angie, but she hadn't gotten any like real reads in that season. Like that's when she first started reading. So, I mean, I didn't think that was a huge deal. We get the tea though. Anybody that knows how to read between the lines gets the tea. So Heather goes in to explain, which shocked the heck out of me. I wonder if they kept this in their back pocket on purpose. But Heather goes in to explain that she's known Angie K since high school. More specifically, she says 10th grade. And basically, she's like, they were never close. And, the only thing that happened was that they ended up sharing a best friend who was Jen. And you can imagine the weird dynamic when you've known somebody for a long time, you guys are not close, but then you become adults and you guys have somebody in the middle that's common to you, but you still aren't close. And then they end up all on this TV show together. So it's interesting to see that, and it makes for a different perspective when you, like, if you were to watch back last season, and then even going forward to watch the dynamic between Heather and Angie K, because it's like, okay, they've known each other forever. They're very familiar and they don't like each other. So now we got to pick apart those layers. So I say all that to say, I think it's less about what Angie K was saying last season and more about this long-standing history, if you know how to read between the lines. So it was interesting to hear that story, and I'm glad that we get that context. Like, that's really interesting and amazing casting. She now goes on. I think that one thing about Heather, I think that she'll make up an issue, baby. Like, she'll literally connect some lines and make up an issue. Her and Meredith have that in common. And so she goes on to say, like, she's kind of weary of Angie K now because, similar to what she did with Jen, Angie K has jumped into a friendship with Lisa. And she calls her a flip-flopper, and she thinks that's weird. Again, I don't agree that that's her issue. I think her issue is more so that they have a long history and they just never really got along. I feel like Angie just never gave her the time of day. And I feel like that's Heather's, if you go back and watch prior seasons, I think that's Heather's underlying issue with Lisa. Like, she talked about that first season, like, Lisa doesn't really pay her any mind. And so I think that's a lot of the ladies' issue with Lisa, or at least used to be. And that's something that Heather hasn't let go. So I think her issue with Lisa and Angie K are one and the same. It's insecurity. This part I can't wait to see play out. So, and the dynamics here were super fun. So, like I said, typically you would see Heather and Whitney come together to, have mess about Lisa. But now it feels like Heather kind of fell back into it, like the Kiki type of mood with Whitney. And she's talking about how she was ear hustling at her event and she heard that Lisa's son Jack is going on the mission. And she has, obvious concerns, I guess, from a Mormon standpoint. Something that you could have guessed. That's what I mean by obvious. Like, she feels like, and I said this last episode, Lisa's not, Lisa and her husband don't do the typical Mormon thing. Like, you know what I'm saying? So it's curious to her that Jack, their son, is choosing to go on a mission. It's not so curious to me, though, right? Like, at the end of the day, yes, he's their child, but we all have parents. No matter what our relationship is to our parents, we all grew up to be adults of our own. Our parents are just people like we are. So when we grow up to be adults or young adults, we tend to make our own decisions and we tend to have our own, identities. So it's not that curious to me. It's interesting, right, that he chose that path, and I'm sure that there's a background to it, but it's not that curious to me. And I think what makes it worse is that Heather is using that, from what she said in her confessional, at least, she's kind of using that to question it felt like questioning Lisa's parenting, because she said, like, as a mother, like, she will be concerned. And she also said, like, I don't think Lisa's prepared for what type of man Jack might come home as in 2 years. I get it. I get what she's trying to say, because she says, like, it's a serious thing to really devote yourself to the Mormon church, and he's going to be teaching it and going door to door and all these things. Totally get it. But it's just not her place at the end of the day, and especially to speak on somebody's child and their parenting. And Whitney clocked that. So again, like I said, I feel like that was the breakdown of their relationship in the first place. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how this goes even further. And even in this same conversation, Whitney's also talking about how she likes Angie K as a friend, and Heather's saying she doesn't like Angie K at all. So there's already that conflict when it comes to their relationships within the group. I saw this a little bit with her conversation with Monica, but it's such a weird position, because I feel like Heather, there's like so little consistency to her. I think that she has this whole book and this brand about being a bad Mormon, right? But now she's judging Lisa for being a bad Mormon as opposed to how her son wants to be, I guess, a good Mormon, right? Like, she's like, well, Lisa's not really that good of a Mormon, so why is her son choosing to be such a good Mormon? But it's like, but you have created this brand about being a bad Mormon and wrote a book, right? And then even alternatively, like, you have this book about being a bad Mormon, but you seem so judgmental about people who are bad Mormons, right? Like, she seems like she has a rubric for what you should be as a Mormon. And Whitney even says that, like, just because you wrote a book doesn't mean you're the person to say it, right?
Just because she wrote a book doesn't give her the right to tell other people how to do it.
And like I said, I felt that way later on in the episode when she was kind of talking to Monica, and the faces and the vibe she was giving her, like, are you a Mormon? Like, you just drank champagne and all this other stuff. So, but we'll get to that. We learned that Meredith is throwing a trip and they're going to the Trixie Motel, which I'm super excited about because I love Drag Race and I love Trixie Motel. And so I'm excited to see them go there. And I don't really have much else on that, but I am excited to see it. We move on to Angie. We get to see her incredibly white house and her really cute family. And it was really interesting hearing about how she met her husband at the hair salon. Now they own 10 salons. And I agree with her. Like, meeting a man that you love and also does hair, like, that sounds phenomenal. So, yeah, I get that. It was really nice getting this story from her. And it was even more interesting now because we're getting, in the same episode, we get to hear her perspective about her relationship with Heather. And it is somewhat similar in terms of like substance, but it's a little bit more positive than Heather's take, which I guess we could have guessed. Like, it doesn't seem like Angie had anything negative to say about Heather. She feels like, you know, hers is more so like they got along and they drifted apart though, and she would kind of want to get back there. Like, she doesn't understand Heather's issue with her, whereas Heather makes it seem like they were never close. So that's the only issue for me. Monica's family is so cute. Like, I feel like we could have stayed there all day, and we did get a ton of footage of it. But like, seeing her with her mom, seeing her with at least one of her daughters, but we know she has four, like, oh my God, we learned so much about Monica just in this one episode. So it was fun really watching her, and I'm excited to see a housewife we don't know the other housewives, like financial status and socio-economical like that. Like, you know, they show whatever they want to show for the point of being on the show. But it seems like Monica's story is very authentic to her, you know, having been married to a rich man and he took care of everything, and now she's taking care of things by herself, and she's got 4 kids, and, you know, she doesn't necessarily feel like she has a financial status that these other women have, even though, you know, some women fake the funk and keep up with the Joneses, right? But that's her story, and I'm excited to see that for a housewife. Like, I'm sure that there have been others. I can't really recall one, but I'm sure that there probably have been others that have had this story because it is a real story, but I'm glad that we're getting to see it. I did also think it was interesting to hear, like, to learn about her dad and how she hasn't seen him since she was 4, and the last thing she knew was that he was gay and married and moved to Florida. There's just so many places her story can really go from a production standpoint, because I think she comes with a lot. So that's exciting. I'm sure that whoever did the casting is sitting on a beautiful check. We next get Whitney's couple dinner with Angie K and her husband. I enjoy seeing the couple dinners, right? Especially for like a new friendship that's blossoming. So I was excited to see this. We start getting the story, because we kind of got it in like clips in the preview that, like, I guess there's some issues with Whitney and her husband this season. So we start getting a little tidbits about their communication being off, and it makes sense. It doesn't feel like storyline. It ties in to me with things that we've seen on the show, right? Like, he lost his job, her career started blossoming. Obviously, we're on season 4 of Salt Lake City, and it's doing really well. And, you know, also she did the therapy last season, so now her trauma was coming back and she was rehashing that. So I think it makes sense that they're having they're having to adjust. So I'm excited to see that play out. It was interesting here to see, because again, Angie didn't have anything negative to say about Heather, right? Like, she was talking about the event. She was saying, you know, it seems like Heather wants to extend an olive branch to everyone. She doesn't know if that olive branch necessarily extends to her, but the event made it seem like Heather wanted to be in a good place with everyone. Meanwhile, we know that Heather doesn't like Angie at all, but we'll get to that. And essentially, Whitney brings up the trip that Meredith is planning, and Angie's like, what trips?
Yeah, I'm so excited for the girls' trip. Are you going?
Wait a minute. So is this all?
So classic housewives, like she wasn't invited, so I'm excited to see how this plays out, especially because Whitney went ahead and invited her. So that's why I'm like, I feel like Whitney is getting to a place, obviously still in mess, but I feel like it's kind of like grade A housewifing. Like if I had to pick who I like on the messy scale between her and Heather, it would definitely be Whitney. It's also super messy because we know that Whitney just met with Heather, and Heather was saying how, you know, her main standout point was that Angie was invited to her event by Lisa, and she didn't want Angie to be there. So it's so funny that Whitney would still go and invite Angie, knowing that Heather is not feeling her, and Heather's going to be there. So now she's going to ruffle the feathers of both Heather and Meredith. And we know those are some easy feathers to ruffle. We then get Heather and Monica out shopping for the trip, and we're learning more and more about Monica. This was a weird scene to me though, because I don't necessarily see Heather and Monica hanging or clicking. I don't know. Like I'm just thinking about I don't know them that well, and definitely not Monica that well. But just from watching their personalities on the show, I don't really see that being a thing. They seem pretty different to me. And I think that Heather, I may be reaching, but for me, I feel like Heather would take more of like a manipulative role as it pertains to Monica, because it already felt like she dove in like, well, how do you know Lisa? Like, how are you friends with Lisa? And how do you know Angie K? Two people that Heather obviously doesn't like. So, I get that she's trying to fill it out and see if she even wants to rock with Monica by association. It's weird, though, because she doesn't mention the Jen of it all, right? Like, Heather was so cool with Jen, and Monica obviously has attachments to Jen. Yes, she was a witness in the case, and she's not necessarily close with Jen, but still there is that connection there. It's just interesting that Heather never mentioned anything about the Jen connection, whether it be positive or negative. She immediately goes to the negative, and she wants to know, well, how close are you to Lisa and Angie K? So it seems a little manipulative to me, like she's trying to see if she can pull Monica to her side, and I don't think that is going to happen. Here, Heather starts to tell Monica about the fact that she knows Angie K from high school. This felt kind of calculated. Like I think that was coming out regardless, because she kind of dropped it and then went to go look at dresses and then kind of gave a little bit more. So I'm like, Heather, I see what you're doing, girl. And Monica was feeding right into it. You know, she seems very authentic, like she's just there for the chatter. She just wants to know. And of course, it's her first season. So I don't know if she's into the mess to the level that Heather is into the mess. Heather starts kind of telling and paraphrasing the story. And in this one, she wasn't positive in the first one when she talked to Whitney, but now she's being even more just like, yeah, I don't like Angie K. Like, I don't like her at all. Like, she's like saying she doesn't trust her and all types of stuff. And it's just like, wow, okay. So, like, that was interesting. I was wondering, like, did something happen now that you're like, you really don't like her and you hope she doesn't come on the trip? Gag is she's coming. But it's just like, yeah, she got really aggressive with that one. So that was interesting. Monica was just as gagged as me. And she justifies it and blames it on the Barbie scissor kicks joke last season. That wasn't that serious. So it really has nothing to do with that. I wish she would be for real. But I think what we know about Heather from the last 4 seasons, 3-4 seasons, is that Heather is never for real. She had a black eye that she wouldn't tell anybody how she got. So come on now. We then start learning that Monica, was raised in the Mormon church from the age of 5, I believe she said. And I don't know, like the tone of Heather's voice just felt so like judgmental to me. She's like, are you a Mormon? Like, are you really? Like, maybe we shouldn't have drank that champagne. Like, she has like that jokey, but like also judgmental tone to her all the time. And I feel like Monica was just trying to really get her story out. But I do like when Monica finally was giving her the reason about, being excommunicated because she had the affair and she got emotional about being judged by the church and being kicked out. It did seem authentic that Heather was like connecting with her. And she's like, yeah, I get it. So that part felt authentic, but Heather still got in her confessional and was like, well, she's cool with Angie K, so I just don't know about that. So, you know what I'm saying? Come on now. It's Heather. We get a hilarious scene. If this is how they're using Mary this season, they're doing a great job. But we get this hilarious scene of Mary like calling the Trixie Motel and asking, do they have Dom Perignon and what snacks do they have? So I thought that was funny. Mary, for comedic relief, is just fantastic. I also thought it was tea, so they finally get to the hotel to go on the trip to Palm Springs, to Trixie Motel. I thought it was tea that they zoomed in on Monica's bag that she was talking about she bought to fit in with the girls. But it's a beautiful bag. But it's just like they zoned right in on it. Like, look at her bag, and it was cute. So good for her. The real tea is that everybody's at the airport and they're wondering, like, where is Whitney? Like, even Lisa, who's supposed to be, close to Whitney now, she had no idea that Whitney changed her flight. Nobody knows her whereabouts. Nobody's spoken to her. And lo and behold, we find out that Whitney is already in Palm Springs. She knew Trixie Mattel first, allegedly, and she pops up first to see Trixie, claim her room, and bring Angie. So she ate it. For me, like, she's eating this episode up. I love it. And I'm pretty sure, like, even episode 2, she's coming for a first chair spot at the reunion. Because, girl. She's also talking about, like, while they're there in Palm Springs, she's talking about taking a big bedroom. I wonder if that happened. But we'll see. We then get this whole big ordeal of them landing, and Lisa dropped her ring in the bathroom at the airport, and they were looking for it for 45 minutes. That would have just drove me nuts. Because I already don't like, I love Lisa, no shade Lisa, but I just don't like traveling. I hate flying, the process of flying, and then you finally land. It's like, I just want to be there. And they stayed at the airport. You got to get your bags, and it seems like they stayed and waited and looked for this $60,000 ring. And then you got to drive to the house. Like, it's exhausting. Like, I see why Mary was in the van, like, over it, and she's telling Lisa, like, girl, you got to get over that ring. Like, it is what it is. I just want to be there. And also Lisa, like, girl, somebody definitely stole your ring. Come on now. Like, even when she was telling everybody it was $60,000, and she literally, as she was telling the security or whoever it was, she's like, yeah, I dropped my ring, and every woman in the bathroom was like, let's look for her ring. And God bless Lisa's heart. Like, I know she thought that was such a positive thing. She's like, everybody in the bathroom wants to look for my ring. No, somebody stole your ring, sis. Somebody stole that ring. They did. So I thought that was interesting. I also thought it was interesting that Monica got so upset when she found out that the ring was insured. And then Lisa is like almost immediately calling to get it replaced. First of all, super cute for Lisa. Because yes, like, I'm going to complain about losing my $60,000 ring too. And then I'm going to call and get it replaced. Like, period. So, I mean, it was an interesting dynamic. But it's weird that that upset Monica so much. So, I want to see how that plays out, if it does. Finally, with it coming to a head, the ladies are on their way to the Trixie Motel. Obviously, Whitney is there with her big surprise. That is Angie K. And I like that she was at least in her confessional able to admit, like, I'm aware that I'm poking a bear and that I'm about to start a fire and it's about to be a mess. Like, I love that. Because, again, I feel like when she was teamed up with Heather, they were on a different level of, like, starting mess and starting chaos. And they would kind of throw the rock and hide their hand. But I feel like last season, Whitney kind of broke that fourth wall and was like, yeah, we've been pulling mess, but I'm not trying to be a part of that type of mess. Like, I want to own my mess. That's what it felt like Whitney's trying to do. So now, I love that she's like, here it is. Like, I'm starting mess and it is what it is. Whereas Heather, I think, is still kind of in her behind the scenes manipulative type of mess. So I can't wait to see how that plays out, and I'm excited to see what happens when the ladies finally pull up, especially obviously Meredith and Heather, how they're going to react to Whitney having brought Angie K, because I'm sure Whitney's going to give, and we know Angie K is going to give. So I can't wait, and I think that this season is going spectacular. I'm having a great time, and I'll see y'all next time.